Great Wednesday. Welcome to the Fully Human Connections podcast. I'm your host, King. I'm joined by my co-host, Reggie. How you doing today, Reggie?
I'm doing real well, King. Always good to be here with you. Before you ask, I'm going to tell you that my spiritual energy is a 10.
I can tell by the energy, the smile. I can feel that 10. Yeah, I concur. I'm a 10 right there with you. So and shifting to the next phase of our show, what's your gratitude month? What you're grateful for that's giving you that 10 energy?
Yeah, so just really, I continue to be grateful um, for having indoor plumbing, a refrigerator with food in it, electricity. I have propane tanks outside the house now because it's getting cooler. I have the fuel for winter heat. My basic needs are met. And I realize that compared to or contrasted with billions of people on the planet whose basic needs aren't met, I have a lot to be grateful for. Um, and there are other things, relatively good health, good friends. Um, but I just really appreciate the things that allow me to take care of things I really want to be doing. And I don't have to worry too much about the basics: food, clothing, and shelter, other than making enough money to continue to um, support those, so I can pay my rent or buy my food, etc. So I feel really grateful just to have a relatively, in terms of physical necessities, a relatively privileged life on this planet.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, like you, I'm grateful for my life, my health, my ability to see, hear, walk, talk, stand, breathe, and have sound mind. And the older I get, the more grateful I am of that. I see signs of folks who, uh, my age, who I believe are starting to lose some of their mental capacity.
Mhm.
I'm seeing older people who have lost some of their mental capacity. So that's become so important that I would hate to have everything else and then have lost that. And then how you manage life with that, you know. So grateful for that. Grateful for also, as you say, having plumbing and the importance of that. We say that if you take it for granted, like how can you never have plumbing? But it could be times when you don't, so you definitely appreciate it. And I'm also grateful for my mother who's alive.
Mhm.
You know, again, sharing love energy with her, getting through our different phases of our relationship. That's one thing I would just want to add this in the middle of my gratitude moment is how important, at least again, these are the little things that have occurred to me that stand out more than it might have been common sense for everybody else, but they get into stand out more in my life now, my thoughts. The importance of when you're choosing a mate, taking into consideration the changes you're both going to go through and asking yourself, are you going to be around for that? Not just age changes, but changes in mentality, changes in emotions, changes because when you look at a family, like I said, I've gone through maybe you change as every 7 years you go through major transformation that I've gone through seven, yeah, 8 iterations there with my mom, almost 8 iterations there with my mother. So and just been there for all of them and loving all of those changes that person has. And then finally, I'm grateful for the opportunity to be on the call with you and or the show, I should say, and the infinite possibilities that this day is going to provide. So that's my gratitude.
Amen.
All right, so let's get things off. What are you taking us for a topic today? What we're discussing?
Yeah, so as always, especially for people who are here for the first time, we're speaking for about 2.5 years now about issues arising through and from my 2022 book, Healing America's Narratives, the Feminine, the Masculine, and Our Collective National Shadow. And we're really following up on what we spoke about last week when we spoke about some of the political ads that I was receiving here where I live in the 5th congressional district in Connecticut, that were things arriving, specifically the mailers that were arriving in my mailbox, that were providing misinformation, uh, partial truths, and outright lies. And they were being funded by uh, two groups. The particular ones that I received were being funded by the AFP Action, which is the political action arm of Americans for Prosperity, which is a conservative organization founded and funded by the Koch brothers. There's just one Koch brother left now, back in their mid 2000s. And then from something called the New York Republican Federal Campaign Committee, which I didn't know what that was exactly, so I looked it up. And they're basically a Republican group that takes donations from around the country and supports different political races around the country, even though it says New York Republican, and it's located in New York, but it's a national group. And they basically were funding the challenger for the 5th Congressional District in Connecticut. So that's what we spoke about last week. What I want to really address this week is in an Axios news report yesterday, either yesterday or the day before, as of September 20th, so 5 days ago, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party in the United States had purchased advertising space, so television and online advertising space, that would appear beginning on August 1st. So a lot of it has already appeared through November 5th, so through Election Day. Combined, the two parties and their candidates and some outside groups had purchased $3.1 billion of ads for the political campaigns up and down the ballot. So from the president down to the local competitors. Most of it is the national expenditures for president and various senatorial races and congressional races. And so the 9 shadow traits that you and I have been talking about, I'll just say them out loud again, so that they're front of mind or top of mind for everybody, are ignorance, arrogance, fear, bigotry, violence, greed, excess, bullying, and untrustworthiness. So we want to look at greed and excess, not only them, but especially them today, because candidates, political parties, and outside groups, often they're PACs, political action committees, see fit to spend billions of dollars in the media in order to get their preferred candidates elected. And often they lie or exaggerate in the advertising. I don't want to say most of the time, but it's probably most of the time. I haven't seen every political ad around the country. I know what I get here. And while they're doing that, in order to save America or make America great again, or whatever the specific approach happens to be, despite the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, which got somewhere in the vicinity of 25 to 30 million people to get insurance after it was passed back in 2010. In the first quarter of 2024, approximately 8.2% of Americans didn't have health insurance. That's about 27 million people didn't have health insurance in the United States. There's approximately 11 million children in this country live in poverty. And I forget the exact number. I have it up here. So let me so I can say it specifically. In terms of people who have food security, insecurity rather, 28 million adults nationwide, 12.5% of the adult population, were living in homes where they didn't know if they would have enough to eat on a weekly basis. So we have real base, when you and I just checked in about being grateful, the thing I always thank God for is, indoor plumbing I mean that, and it's kind of a joke in many ways, but I really appreciate it. But I have food in my refrigerator, and I can get more when we're off. I could get in my car and I can go and I can buy more food without having too much of a problem doing that. There are 28 million Americans who have food insecurity. So we have this political system, which is the political system is a combination of the government and corporations that spends billions of dollars telling lies in ads to get people elected, while there are millions of Americans hungry, millions of children in poverty, and 27 million people without health insurance. So greed and excess, right? Excessive, that in order to run for office in this country, especially national office, president, senator, US representative, you have to spend millions of dollars. You have to do it. That's how the system works. And that makes money for media companies and advertising companies and some others, I'm sure that I'm not, and political consultants and others. So the general nature of people who make a lot of money in order to help get certain people elected into political office, and the people who get elected get paid reasonably well, right? You know, you're a senator or congressperson, you're making 174K a year. Now, if you measure yourself compared to Jeff Bezos, it's not that much money. But it takes me, in general, 3 or 4 years to make 174K. Now, granted, I was a Catholic school teacher and a teaching poet, and I write a lot, so I don't get paid for a lot. But yeah, there's this whole skewed view of what to do with money and what's important. And that's part of the American shadow. The summary statement that I'll make, and this appears in the book, and you and I have mentioned it before, is that one of the real issues in the United States is that even though no individual would admit this and say it was true about himself or herself or their self, is that the United States of America, the American society values money, things, and beliefs more than people and other living beings. Now, no one's going to say that that's true about themselves, but all you need to do is look at the operation of the country, look at the infrastructure, the systems. Right? There's more value in money, things, and beliefs than there is in valuing people and taking care of people. And I could provide a lot of examples of that, but I'll be quiet for now, so you can respond.
You know, I want to thank you again for choosing another wonderful topic. Again, a very timely topic because that's kind of what's on my mind as well, and it's kind of seeing where our country and our society in general is just really headed, and what we're tolerating, what we're accepting as normal. You know, and it takes me back to a quote that I thought was profound, and you see how just much of a prophet he really was, because when I think certain individuals come along, they can either through their music or through their speeches, service, they operate at a different frequency than most of us are operating at. And their actions, behaviors become timeless. Like what they say and what they do can fit in any era. You'll say that person could be a leader in this era as well, just because of how they were thinking. So with that being said, it takes me to a quote by Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And he made this quote during his Beyond Vietnam speech in 1967. And I'm just going to take an excerpt from it.
Mm-hmm.
And it says that I am convinced that we are able to get on the right side of the world revolution. We as a nation must undergo a radical revolution of values. Speaking of what you just talking about values. We must rapidly begin to shift from a thing-oriented society to a person-oriented society, where machines, computers, profit motives, and property rights are considered more important than people. The giant triplets of racism, extreme materialism, and militarism are incapable of being conquered until we can. And we see that right now that was back in 1967. We shifted more, not less, in that particular direction. Where, to your point, it costs. We're using the term billions, like millions were used 20 years ago. Everything's billion now. Not, it's like once we broke the threshold, everything becomes billions now. More billionaires are being, created, and it's like I remember billionaires used to be a rare thing. You have one, two, and now it's you can't count how many billionaires there are. You know what I'm saying? And I'm saying all that to say is this is where, to me, us as a society, I feel is we're slaves to the system because instead of us fighting that change, that shift, we capitulate. We just go ahead and do what's been told. You know, like for example, for them to say, "Well, listen, it's going to cost you know millions of dollars to run for president right now." It just is. And we accept that. It's like who really? How many people? By the millions are truly undecided at this point in the presidential election. Now I can see, a local election still millions of dollars is insane amount of money to spend just to try to convince through the media to try to sway someone's, voting. And most of those things don't really affect us on a local level. You know, the presidential election, for me, we should, who still is undecided at this stage of the game? Because our politics become so polarized now the last three elections that you still that undecided voter who still looks at, well, let me see, really, this is the time of year I love. I'm really, last six, weeks of the presidential election, I'm gonna really delve deep down and decide who I'm really gonna vote for. I'm ignoring everything else. These last 6 weeks, I'm really gonna knuckle down and make my mind up right now. I mean, are there millions and millions of people who fit that particular description? To the point where all the messaging, all the marketing, all the communication has to be geared to that particular part of the population. See, my thing is, if the people really begin to get organized, like I was just uh, at this location I go to and do some work, and I listen to the guys talk. And everybody's talking about football now. It's football season. I'm just hearing how football is just uniting conversations that would not be there if football wasn't there. Like these individuals probably wouldn't be conversing with one another across racial lines, across ethnic lines. Football is a commonalities, having their favorite teams and discussing how the games are going to go or how the games went. And I'm saying, imagine the people went distracted by football, things that really doesn't matter, and the conversations that were being had were conversations about how money is being used, how poverty is there, how the education system is being taken, how healthcare is not there for everybody, how seniors are treated in this country. You know, and those were the things people were discussing on a daily basis. Things would get done. You know, so
Mhm.
it's like we're making those choices to ignore what's in our need and only focus on what's in our want. And to your point about greed, we sensationalize that. And like we look up and hold these people have all this who've been greedy and have excess of money. We put out a certain level, and then we see the ignorance of how they are because the money gives them the capability of showing how ignorant you really can be. See, most folks would do it; they just don't have the financial resources to do it. Then we see someone like Diddy who has these financial resources, and you saw how he behaves. But I really believe that's how most people would behave if they were in it. So we don't really have a problem with the morality of it until he's caught. I mean, he sings about it in the songs. This is what I do, and everybody loves the song. Then when his life emulates the song, or they say art, emulates life emulates art. Then it's like, oh wow, he really did that. I thought he was just joking. But then you also get all the other people come out the woodwork and say, well, he's been doing that for years. And if you look at everybody, Jeff, whether it's Epstein, whether it's Weinstein, or P. Diddy, whoever the person may be, one thing that's always common among all of them is they got people who say they've been doing that for years. It's never, oh my God, I never knew he was doing it. That's a shock. It's like everybody, they can all recount situations or stories. And it's like, so you tolerated that all these years. So that's more normal to you than him not doing it is normal to you. And that I'm just saying that greed and excess, that's become the new norm for us. And so we accept that as a society instead of fighting for that. It's kind of like the close on this, use this analogy. It's like we're all overweight, unhealthy, and we're all saying the image in our head is that we're all 160 and incredibly in shape. And that's what we want. And we're going to talk about that, but we're never going to do anything to make any action towards that. We're going to just put the image in our mind, dream about it, but we're never going to take action towards it. And that to me is where we are as a society with regards to our political, economic structure and the injustice that's inherent in it.
Yeah, so there's a lot in there. One thing I just want to clarify, because I think it's important, and I bumped into this several years ago, and it's not particularly new. A lot of people probably knew this. It was just new for me. When we talk about millions and billions and even trillions, when we talk about war and the military, especially we talk about trillions, or the global marketplace, we talk about trillions, just to get a sense of what those numbers mean. If you translate a million into a number of seconds, a million seconds accounts for 11.6 days. So about a week and a half. All right. So, a week and a half ago, that's easy to conceive of. Maybe even remember what I did a week and a half ago. A billion seconds accounts for 31.7 years. So that's going back to around, I guess, 1993, give or take.
Right.
All right. So that's 3 decades ago plus. So strap your seatbelts on and put on your flak jackets for a trillion, boys and girls. So a trillion seconds account for 31,710 years. So that's centuries ago. And at 31,710 years ago, there were no hominids, no human ancestors on the North American continent. There was other creatures, but no humans. So that's the difference between a million of something, a billion of something, and a trillion of something. Put that in perspective, just a number that I've been working with because of some of the teaching I'm doing. From October 2001 to August 2021, basically the time of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, post 9/11, the complete Department of Defense budget in the United States was $14 trillion for everything, not just those 2 wars, but for the 800 bases around the world that we have and everything, but $14 trillion over the course of 20 years, basically. So not quite $1 trillion a year, but it was in the hundreds of billions of dollars a year. And throughout all that time, there were children in poverty, hungry people, and people without health insurance. So people can make some really good arguments about the military. And I probably agree with some of the arguments. But again, caring about people is not the highest priority in this country, regardless of what anyone says during an election year, because we don't do it. We don't put our money where our respective mouths are. And then to your point, yeah, I mean, these we put on pedestals these famous wealthy people, and even those that didn't commit, crimes against women. Some of the people who are most successful, then they hawk products. They're already worth hundreds of millions of dollars, if not $1 billion, and then they go promote fast food, franchises. They promote online gambling, which is going to implode at some point. There's going to be scandals around that because there's going to be. If you look at gambling in general, it's not when you get money involved and you can win and lose money based on the outcome of a sporting event. You're just looking for trouble, boys and girls. And people can quote me on that. It'll happen. And people, former athletes, some current athletes are promoting it. Professional athletes. They're taking money to promote the gambling sites.
Most
That's
are
one example.
No, most are that I know. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. And who's going to be most influenced by that? You? Probably not. Me? Probably not. But young kids, teenagers, college students who idolize or care about these stars. And some of the stars are from other entertainment besides sports. Um, but it all comes down to the money. I mean, and the title of my newsletter this week was "It's Not About the Money," and then I give all the examples of how it is about the money. But it's a real problem. And again, we bring it back to the political sense. Um, you get caught in it if you're elected to office. One of my students, who's an adult woman, was actually a Catholic nun, said yesterday in a class that she went to a meeting where one of the Connecticut senators, and it's a guy I'm going to vote for. I voted for him for years. I'm going to continue voting for him. He does a good job. But she went up to him because they had a meeting in one of the cities in Connecticut around affordable housing. And she went up to him afterwards, and he's pretty accessible when he's present somewhere. And she said, when you get back to the Senate, you have to go to the Senate floor and say, we're going to cut the military budget in order to spend more money on affordable housing across the country. And he looked at her and he didn't disagree with her. He said, the only problem with that is if I do that, I'll get laughed out of the Senate. Because you can't make that argument in the United States Senate or in the House of Representatives. So it's a real problem. You have to work within the system if you want to make things better, and the system is broken.
That's why I think some people, or in my opinion, the election as close as it is because they've checked out. They don't believe that. Well, regardless of who gets elected, here's what's going to stay the same. It's still going to be a status quo of the country's still going to be based off materialism, greed, excess, materialism. I mean, militarism is still going to be rampant. Those things are going to still be there. So what we're voting for when we vote for Kamala is keeping that going without changing much. That way it's the known insanity or the known injustice. And what Donald Trump represents is the unknown injustice. On top of everything else staying the same, here's what's going to get worse. And here's how it's going to get worse, right? So that's what we're deciding against. That. So that can't get a lot of folks excited about it. And that's the sad thing about it, where I believe that if more people decided to be willing to, again, sacrifice, begin to be critical thinkers, look at things from a fully human perspective instead of just their own tribe. Because, we all can delve down into our tribes, whether it's based on our gender, based on our career, based off our state we live in, based off our favorite teams, based off our race, our religion. We all can justify when we choose the leaders of our tribe doing injustices to other tribes. We can justify and say, well, look what this tribe did. Look what that tribe did over there. So that warrants our tribe doing this. When it should be, that's to stop injustice, period. It should be the goal. That should be the thought process. And that thinking is so supplanted, that frequency, I think it's really a frequency that we vibrated. That frequency is so far supplanted below most people's operating frequencies because they're just trying to survive. Yeah. And then if you get out of survival mode, the goal now is to be in excess mode. So just drive past, the mode of being able to have enough money to help other people. I mean, think about it. How wrong we are as human beings if we let one person generate $1 trillion. To your point of how many years, using years as an analogy, comparing the differences between the numbers. So that one person with all this poverty on the planet, all this suffering, amassed $1 trillion when he's done nothing to say, I'm worthy of that. I created this. No, even someone as rich as Elon Musk, if you really look at where his riches come from, it's from him buying stock in his own company and then doing stock buybacks and then tripling and 10 times his wealth. It didn't come strictly from folks that Tesla is such a great product and SpaceX are such great products and you got to have them. And he just worked hard and he just got his money that way. No, he got his money through financial instruments and mechanisms that most of us can't play at, large government contracts. So you can't justify $1 trillion. You should have that based on capitalism and say, I generated this, I should have this, and these people over there are not doing absolutely, they're doing nothing. So that's why they have nothing. They literally just get up and just sit there in zombie mode all day. So that's why they have nothing. And so for me, until we can begin to start to say, yeah, that's unjust, but I'm just gonna go back over here and watch the football game, and I'm just gonna go over here and focus on myself because I can't change that, and just watch it get worse. It's like we all see the crack in the ceiling, and everybody's walking by like, huh, that crack's getting larger. I just pray to God that it doesn't bust when I'm underneath it. I can just keep walking past, and no one's gonna try to fix the crack. Like the crack has to bust. So that's just my take on the excess and greed. It's like watching our society, watching the media. I'm doing that this last part. Even and this is where the Democrats, to me, lose the more moral playground or more high ground is when you see everybody knows Fox is biased. It's not even a joke. They're going to be extremely biased. They're going to do what they want to do, say who they're going to say. You don't even really expect real news from them. You expect opinions to submit to satisfy a certain agenda. Well, CNN is supposed to be biased. I mean, unbiased, fair, and but then you see what they're doing. Like uh, the congressman, the Muslim Talib, forget her name if I'm not saying her name correctly, but Jake Tapper made a statement of trying to misquote an article saying that she made an anti-Semitic statement about Michigan's attorney general. And she didn't make any anti-Semitic statement, but CNN kept beating that drum to the point where all the hosts were then questioning the governor Gresham Whitmer on condemning her for the anti-Semitic statement. And the original person who wrote the article says, "I didn't say she made an anti-Semitic statement." So it was created and blown out of context to the point where, and it became CNN's news cycle to everybody to talk about it because what they were trying to say is that there's anti-Semitic stuff being said on both sides. So they're trying to create a false comparison, a false equivalency, and that wasn't the case. And my point I'm getting at, so you realize, you learn, you can't trust any news source because that's clearly, in my eyes, criminal. They haven't come back and apologized and stood up for that. So you see, they are controlled. At the end of the day, it's not the media for our benefit as far as the constituents, the regular people. It's a corporate controlled media that's giving you a message to push a particular agenda. And once you realize that, then you can start looking for real news and other sources. But until you accept that, whether it's CNN, or whether it's Fox, MSNBC, or Newsmax, that it's still going to be handed to you with an agenda behind it, and not just here's the news, here's the facts. You do what it is, may. Here's an opinion piece, here's a controlling piece, here's a slant, here's how we want you to think or behave from what we're sharing with you as well.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate your putting that out there as you just did, and and I'm not going to. This isn't intended to oversimplify what you said, but you're talking about the difference between journalism, where somebody investigates and then says, "Here's what happened. Here's who was involved. Here's when it happened. Here's where it happened." Generally speaking, the who, what, where, and when. That's journalism, and any authentic journalist can then corroborate the story. Yeah, those are the four things: who, what, where, and when. When you start getting into, and this is to your point, why, and what's the impact of it, then you get into what I call performance news celebrities, where they're famous people, they get paid a lot of money, and they're paid to give their opinions about the news. And vast numbers of Americans on the political left and right, in my experience, confuse political performance news celebrities with journalists. Um, because when journalists get things wrong, and they do, they correct it. When performance news celebrities get things wrong, they just go on to the next thing. It's
Right.
like they're not going to say, I got that one wrong. I mean, one of the craziest examples that, you can still, if you want to search for the video, which I wouldn't do anymore, but back in the day when Donald Trump was calling the coronavirus, COVID-19, a new Democratic hoax, various people, including Sean Hannity, repeated that and said, "Yeah, it's a Democratic hoax. It's not anything to worry about." Blah 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 blah. And then, like a year later, after however many millions of people were dead worldwide, and supply chains were, had shut down, and the economy was tanked, and people, a lot of money was lost, and a lot of people suffered. Hannity came on and said, "We never said it was a hoax." I mean, there's video of him, like he said it on his show. Well, we never said that, and you can find it. So it's like there's a shamelessness to it.
Right.
I mean, in our language around Shadow, it's the arrogant piece, because he's not ignorant; he's a smart guy. But there's an arrogance. Who cares if I lie and then deny the lie, because I'm getting paid whatever he gets. It's at least 7 figures a year. It's probably 8 figures a year for what he does. Just keep the advertising dollars coming in. It's a real, the amount of work we have to do now to get to the truth of anything is significant, and it takes some time and energy. And I understand, I disagree with, but I understand, as you said, some people just bail out. I'll just turn on the football game and watch football, drink beer, and eat potato chips. Not to stereotype football fans. And I watch football sometimes. I don't sit down every Sunday and watch 75 games. But or pick a sport. The World Series is going to be coming up. The baseball players are coming up. The NBA is going to get going. College basketball will be picking up. Just pick a sport, and it's an escape. Veg out. Don't worry about what's going on, because it's just too much work nowadays and too complicated. It's a scary state of affairs for a democratic republic, as Ben Franklin said when the woman asked him, "So, Mr. Franklin, what kind of a government are you building for us?" when he was coming out of the Constitutional Convention. And he said, "A Republican form of government, madam, if you can keep it." Because he understood what they were building and how it had never been done successfully before for any sustained period of time in history. Basically, what worked prior to that was monarchy in Europe. So, and maybe we're just seeing how powerful and strong it can be right now, because maybe we'll be okay at the other end of this craziness, but maybe not. There's no guarantee. But there's a lot of people making a lot of money and using the money to make more money, rather than really serving human beings who are suffering.
But see that, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I'm done. I'm good.
I look at Baltimore like Baltimore is the micro to the United States, the macro. And I've often said this analogy in Baltimore. It's an old African saying that the way you train an elephant to condition his mind is you have a stake in the ground, you put a chain around the elephant's leg, and it has only so many feet that the chain is. It limits the elephant's movement, so it can only walk around in a circle. You keep that on the elephant's leg for years to the point eventually the elephant's mind gets so conditioned, not expecting to get beyond that length of that chain. You can replace a chain with a string, and an elephant will never break the string.
Mm.
And that's what I see. Like Baltimore, I've seen it on a larger scale play itself out in national elections. Is that people have been so conditioned to being held down or left out of the money conversation that most people will not even see that if you don't think about finances in the context of planning for it, how you're going to manage as a family, and just really growing your life in that path, you're going to end up being struggling in your later years. That's how the system we live in is designed. And then you're going to be at the mercy of this system. And this system is merciless as far as how it treats people who has no money. So not only do you have no money, you really have no rights. You're really less than a human being as far as how society is going to deal with you if you commit a crime. You have no wiggle room. You have no benefit of doubt if you're poor and someone accuses you of a crime. You're guilty, and you gotta fight the system. And everyone knows the system is corrupt. Everyone knows the system is unjust, and yet still we allow it to play itself out. Whether it's a criminal justice system, whether it's an education system, whether it's the healthcare system. I mean, to me, I would have thought that again. Made this comment last week. I would have thought that COVID would have shown everyone the importance of having universal health. Like even it's beyond your own selfish. Well, I don't want to pay more taxes, so this person over here who's a bum can get health care should make you say, okay, well, I see the reason why they should have health care because they can affect me, even though they're a bum, they're over there, they're and their bad health choices, whatever it is you want to judge them on. The fact they can get a virus that can come over there and affect you should be the reason why everybody should be able to get treated, so that it helps you down the road. If you gotta look at it from that, you still can't look at it from a fully human context and look at it through that lens. Look at it, well, I still benefit by everybody having
Yeah.
it. And to have people just walk around in this fog and this conditioned mind of, well, we only can do so much, or this is how things must play itself out. Again, let me just think about the sanity of sports. I enjoy sports, so I'm not judging anyone who watches sports. We grew up in this culture, as you say, it's a culture of givens. Now my critical thinking self is saying doesn't have the value and importance that it once had in my life. And that's what I'm talking about. The importance, not just enjoyment of it, but if it really has importance in your life where it governs your emotions and behaviors based on the winning and losing of a team, when you see the corruption with the referees, you see it's embedded. So it's not like it's just perfect. So why put that emotion, that much effort, that much importance among something where a referee can call holding and destroy a whole game, a whole season on that call? And instead of getting it right, we just have to accept the fact that was a bad blown call, and this is the outcome. And I see that so many times that next year now it's like, well, let's start over again. That's new year. Let's let that go. And the insanity behind hoping for something different. That's where I'm going. That's where I want to sum all this up. That you lose sight of hope. The elephant has lost sight of hope and can't break the string. Most people in Baltimore City have lost sight of hope of a change. It sounds good. The thought of water coming one day to 30 miles, that sounds good, delicious. But knowing that all you ever get is sprinkles, your thirst will never get fully quenched. And accepting that, where at the very least, what I'm advocating and what I'm saying people should be thinking towards is maybe I can't control, as Stephen R. Covey talks about, my circle of concern, but at least let me begin to focus on my circle of influence and start with myself. Like Michael Jackson says, that man in the mirror, how can I become more fully human? What can I do to serve better? How can I make the world a better place and make the people around me have better lives and find peace and solace through those choices and behaviors?
Yeah. Yeah. You've referred to that elephant training before. I like that example. And it reminds me, so I'm going to provide a counterpoint. I'm going to counter the elephant training with a monkey story. Um, that I This is from the book Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, which came out in 1974. First book I ever read more than once.
Mm.
And in it, the author um, talks about something called the South Indian monkey trap, which I believe is a real thing because the book is nonfiction. And in this area, I assume presumably it's in South India, in order to capture monkeys, they would get a coconut, hollow it out, fasten it to a tree or a big stone so it couldn't be taken away. And they would put some rice in it, but they would make the hole just big enough so a monkey could get its hand in to get the rice. But once, like, so reach in to get the rice, but when it grabbed the rice, it would make a fist, and the fist was too big to come out. So the monkey was stuck in there with this fistful of rice, and it was a monkey, so it wanted the rice, so it's not going to let go of the rice. And so there was a larger context for this story in the book, but what it was teaching, it talked about human beings. Okay, I'm in this situation now, I'm stuck. So that, it's like the elephant has this chain, and then now suddenly it's a string. What does the elephant or the monkey have to do to see what's really keeping it stuck? And in the
Right.
monkey's case, he has to make a sacrifice because he got his hand in like this. He's going to have to let go of the rice, and then his hand will come back out. So it's and we're not picking on monkeys and elephants here. We
Right.
humans have, I don't know, I think we have some advantages with a prefrontal cortex, so we can critically think and we can reflect if we choose to. But okay, here's the mess I'm in. I have this string that used to be a chain around my ankle, or I have my handful of rice, but I can't get away. I can't even eat it. How did I get into this situation? And then rethink it. And human beings are capable of remedying those two conditions if they choose to. But that helplessness, kind of a learned helplessness, which is a phrase that I think a lot of psychologists and sociologists use, is
Mm.
over a period of time, okay, I can't do it. So I can't do it. Can you help me? And with not critiquing situations where people really do need help. We mentioned, children in poverty. We're not criticizing some 7-year-old kid who's living in poverty through no volition of his, her, or their own. We're not talking about that situation. We're talking about people who, if they wanted to do the work and reflect and could be a little bit critical, could probably at least make some progress where they're stuck. And I said, I said it for my own life. There's been moments when I said, "Oh man, this just isn't fair," and I was waiting around. The cavalry wasn't coming. So I had to figure something out on my own. And usually it's through my own process and, good friends or, close family members who are willing to reach out and say, well, have you considered this, my friend? um, but yeah, we're not the elephant and we're not the monkey.
Yeah, but that's the point. We're supposed to be smarter than both of those animals, and we can use those animals because these, you know, their instinct tells them that. I liken the monkey to a job. I think that's what you work for someone else. And I'm not judging. I'm saying for my own personal. This is my own personal critique of myself. And I work for someone else. I'm like that monkey. I grab the rice, which is a job, and I'm thinking that I'm gonna get fulfillment from it. I'm gonna get refreshed, nourished from it. And I realize that the more I put into it, the more I grab at it, I can never take it with me. And so I gotta let it go and step away. I walk away with nothing first and then build outside it and have the faith that I'm gonna be able to work. And that's how because I'm just liking myself to the point where my point I'm making is I'm not putting down animals. I'm saying humans are like that in that context. I'm using me specifically with the monkey analogy. That's how I've often felt working for someone my entire life. And we have to be willing to, you know, put away Netflix. So everything now is controlling every aspect of your mind and your time. As you talked about at the beginning of the subject, is the reason there's billions of dollars being put out there is because now through our technology, I can get you anywhere, wherever you are, for the most part. And we like that. We carry our devices with us everywhere we go. The phone has to be with you. You know what I'm saying? Your phone is the only thing in your life that you keep cognitive of. Where is my phone? Not so I can make a call or I'm expecting a call, but it's because I may be notified. So someone might be trying to let me know something for some reason. And if you're a person who are going to be on social media now, commit your time to that, then I want to be as advertisers get in front of you. So they're paying for that. And they're getting the data of when you're going to be available, how often, what do you look at when you are on the phone? How often, how long are you on the phone? What makes you actually share a video or share a comment? Or what drives their purchase decision from browsing from Amazon to actually pulling the trigger to, how much time, all that data is what those advertisers are paying for. And that's what the biggest dollars come into play. And again, the point of the matter is we know this. And it's like we realize there's a bigger system at play. But again, like I said, we all feel helpless. It's like we look at the elephant looking down at that string, like, I know I can pull it, but I'm afraid of once I break it, what do I do next? I'm used to being here. I learned helplessness. I'm used to being here in this circle. I know my mind's conditioned to this circle, so the circle is safe.
Hmm.
I get outside the circle, that's unknown. What do I do when I'm out there? And am I capable of surviving out there? And that's why I think that learned helplessness that you talked about is where most people are. And we're willing to watch those ads, go through the same election cycle of choosing candidates based off. I mean, I'm appalled, to be honest. And I wrap my point up with this. But I'm walking up to make my vote, and you got these folks out there who are handing out the flyers and brochures of different candidates, and, showing you people who've joined the same list, like vote down this whole Democratic list. I'm offended that you think that you can hand me something while I'm in line that's going to influence my vote. I already made my mind up before I come. I don't want your flyer here to try to convince me that I should vote for all these other candidates as well. And the fact you think you can give me that, and that's a culture, is insulting, to be quite honest.
Yeah. Do you? So, and I'm just curious because I know in Connecticut there's a you can't do any solicitation within 75 feet of the entrance to the voting places. Do they have that in Maryland, or can you just hand people stuff?
Well, I don't know if it's quite 75 feet, but they're there. But
Yeah,
it's like soon you pull into the parking lot. That's what I'm
yeah,
getting to. So
yeah,
before you
yeah.
actually get to the doorway, they're out there. They have their t-shirts on. They try and get your attention.
Yeah.
They're trying. So yeah, there is some law that prohibits while you're in line, but just getting to that line, they're trying to
Right.
get your attention again. You
Yeah,
know.
yeah. Man.
So again, and my point is, as we wrap things up, how do we, as let's take it to the conclusion to get some folks some practical advice and next steps on how they can become more fully human. How do we deal with knowing that we're getting bombarded with this much media, this much money is being spent to influence, control our minds? How do we manage to navigate that?
Yeah. It the one thing which is it's kind of a flip thing to say out loud, but it's doable, is um, choose to let this go. I don't mean stop it cold turkey because some people need it for different things, but be conscious about how you use your phone. Um, Whether it's setting times of the day when you're not going to use it or whatever, you find ways not to use your phone. I mean, if we had more time, I wrote I wrote 2 letters to the person I'm going to vote for U.S. Senate, yesterday. 8.5 by 11 real letters. I typed them, I printed them, put them in envelopes with checks for donations, because they keep hammering me via text and email. And I'm trying to make a point. And it's a long story, so I won't get into that now. But make a choice. In other words, we say, okay, this bombardment is not enough, and figure out how you use your smart TV or your phone or your computer, and begin to choose to do things that are offline. Just do that. So that's one. No one's going to do it for you. If you're, an adult, if you can vote, if you're old enough to vote, if you're old enough to go into the military and fight in the war, and you can drive a car, no one's going to fix that for you. You have to make a choice. That's one. Second one, which is kind of a paradox as I say it, but if you're not yet familiar with the site usafacts.org, it's founded by, I always get his name wrong, the former CEO of Microsoft. I think his name is Steve Ballmer, but don't quote me on that name. I think it's Steve Ballmer. But he loves numbers and facts and data. He was a successful CEO for like 30 some odd years at Microsoft. But what this website does, they just dug in and they get information about the United States government. Across issues, we want homelessness, the budget, the military, whatever. And they have graphs and they have little videos you can watch, but they don't take any stances. They say, here's the data, right? Draw your own conclusions. It's a, and I've negotiated it for a little while now, and I found it to be really useful. I even tried to corroborate certain things going to government websites, and it held up. I think Ballmer's better at that than I am. But I would say that's another thing you can do if you are interested in what's going on in the country, and you hear all these numbers and stats, and this side said this side said it's not true. Go get some statistics yourself, whether you get them directly from government sites or you get them from a place like usafacts.org, and do some work, because nobody is going to do it. Well, in a way, usafacts.org does some of the work for you. It consolidates and makes it easy to see in graphs and different things. But don't wait for the cavalry, because they're not coming. You're going to have to take care of yourself, and your group and your people and other people. But it's a little bit of human volition and a little bit of agency, and ask for help if you need it, especially if you're a man, because we don't do that. We're conditioned not to, because that's a sign of weakness. So be vulnerable, ask for help. And there are people who will help you, almost guaranteed. So that's my challenging advice for today.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. I think about, as you were saying that, asking for help, how much we go out our way to avoid what we see. We'll accept more pain of being lost than to ask for that. We feel that there's more pain with the embarrassment of having someone judge us than it is painful going through what we're going through. Mm-hmm. And that's how men condition themselves. But thank you for saying that. We reached the end of our show. Again, thank you for choosing a wonderful topic. As we conclude our show, we like to, again, show folks that when we talk about being fully human, that we're not just saying that in the context it's impossible. There's folks who've already done it, some folks who are actually doing it. And we want to highlight and give flowers to those individuals. And so each week we say a name that we feel the person, or it could be a group of people who we feel exhibit the fully human characteristics and behavior traits. And so, with that being said, I'll go first. And the person I'm gonna name is Napoleon Hill. I think I've said his name before, but again, he came to mind throughout our conversation, and just some other things in my life that just this week made me really appreciate him, and again, the service he brought. See, I think when you choose to be fully human, you accept the fact that service is something you have to do. That's your purpose.
Hmm.
How you serve differentiates among who we are. The service is what we all have to do. It's I forgot who made this quote. I think it was some attributed to Ali. I don't know if it's true or not, but I love the quote. And I'm gonna misquote part of it, but basically, service is the rent we pay for being here on this planet,
Okay.
right? And I really believe that. And I believe human when you're fully human, you believe that. And to me, Napoleon Hill exhibited that. Writing the book he wrote, he wasn't financially successful most of his life. Everything he talked about was becoming rich and how to develop the think part. I think
Hmm.
that's the most difficult part of being rich is the thinking part, because how much we've been conditioned and controlled and formatted by our education systems. And he actually, was given an opportunity or given a choice to choose, by Andrew Carnegie, write this book, and I'm gonna make all the connections and help you do all that, but I'm not gonna pay you a dime for it. So you got to figure out how to survive, and it's gonna take you years because you got to do research, and you gotta, be creative and get to the interview. You gotta do everything yourself. I'm just gonna make introductions for you, and he did that, and because he chose to do that, I think most people would turn that down. Most people would say, "No, one of the richest men in the world. How dare you not gonna pay me? You have the money to pay me. It's your idea to write this book." And you're not going to help when you can really be the greatest benefit of finding capital. And I don't think he would have been as revered, remembered, celebrated had he chosen to be paid for it. The fact he went out there on faith and wrote the book and talked to folks, he created the energy and the culture around the think part. And that to me is all the behaviors of being fully human because he didn't judge people. He was willing to share the information with each men, women. Of course, to read the book is written from a white man's perspective. Later on, he created a Think and Grow Rich, a black choice. And he realized some of the timing of his writing it was only for that era, but he was more open minded and without the bias of being hateful to any particular race or gender. I just think he was a good person. Lived most of his life as giving service, and through his work, has changed lives of millions, and will change the lives of millions more.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for that. So I'm gonna mention actually a good friend of mine, guy I met in Connecticut in 1995. He's my longest standing friend here in Connecticut. I have some people who I've known since childhood and from New York, but I had a conversation with him last night. His name is John Cusano, and he's uh, has a bachelor's degree in industrial design, and his master's degree is in consciousness studies. So he's done a lot of his own work. He's in his a couple of years older than I am, so he's in his 70s. But we met last night. He had come from a board meeting where he had been hired to help this not-for-profit organization here in Connecticut uh, to meet with the board and to help them take the next step with this big not-for-profit, very successful organization. So he was there with the executive director and with the board. And the board was a surgeon, a bank president, lawyer. I mean, a bunch of really successful people who were successful in their own right. And my buddy has been working with boards, not-for-profit boards, for years. He was an executive director. He worked for the state. So, and he's bumped into a lot of boards that were just useless. They didn't really do anything for the organization. They were just able to put board member on their resumes. So he went into this meeting last night or yesterday afternoon, and and you'd like him because he's a systems thinker. He understands systems in a probably different way than you as an engineer, but he approaches things from a systems view, and he's used to going in and speaking to boards, and just because what he says is unfamiliar to them, they push back and they say, "Well, that's not going to work. We can't do that," or whatever. And they're surgeons and bank presidents, so they think they're important, and some of them are. And so he had this experience yesterday. He gets in there and he does the beginning of his introduction, what he's going to do. Then he puts them into breakout groups and make them do some work on core values, the core values of the organization. And they just did everything he asked them to do. And at the end, they were really happy with it. So he got no pushback. They really appreciated him. And so we were laughing when we were talking last night. Um, you know, he and I have the same personality type. We're both second generation Italian Americans. He's from Connecticut. I'm from New York. We just kind of go in with a little bit of a chip on our shoulders, a little edginess, and we expect, we're looking for the argument. I didn't get one. So it was this hysterical and really affirming, because he's really good at what he does. And I'm laughing a little bit, but he's really good at what he does for organizations who are interested in evolving and learning new things about themselves and the world at large. So last night he went in looking for a fight, and he got received really well. So I just think that's great for him, and he's just been a good friend for years, and we've supported each other in many ways. So that's my buddy John.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing the story. And I'd like to read some of John's information. Definitely into that place of consciousness and growth mindedness. But as we bring our show to an end, again, Reggie, thank you for choosing today's topic, for writing the book originally, for being present as always, bringing the energy and being intent to help start off a great Wednesday and enjoy the conversation. I always learn. That's one of the fascinating things about hosting the show with you. I'm always going to learn as well. So I'm not here just to, give my opinion. I can learn and often learn, and just put me on things that help me become even more wiser in my age. And I want to thank our listening audience for listening to this episode, whether you're watching it live or you're watching the replay again. Let's continue to look at ways that we can do critical thinking and all decide to be more fully human. It's next Wednesday, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Let's be fully human. Thank you.